Hello and welcome back to the Nerd Impact podcast for our 14th episode. And today we are discussing a very impactful album, for me at least, and I think Aidan will provide his opinion on it. But we're discussing Daughter's 2018 critically acclaimed album, You Won't Get What You Want. So Aidan, I mean, I know this wasn't an album you'd listened to prior to me mentioning for the podcast, but you know, how was your experience of listening to it, I guess?
I think experience is probably the correct word to use for this. It falls under the sort of music I'd listened to. Obviously, I'd never heard of it before until you suggested it for this episode. I even did how you kind of asked me to, which was full earphone experience. Mixed feelings on it, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I'm in the music. I know music's very important to a lot of people. So I'm not here to bash it. This is very much an episode of discussion. I didn't dislike it. It wasn't an absolute trash fire. How some people would, can just completely write off albums. I listened to it twice through, front to back. There's some things I like about it, and then some things that I would prefer, or maybe would have taken out or changed. But I think that's music to some people, and this isn't my core sort of music taste. It's obviously a very industrial-based album, which is nice to kind of have a resurgence of that. Really, my as mainstream as it probably is, 9 Inch Nails is kind of my gateway band to in the industrial scene, and there's some clear influences of that in this album. But yeah, it was pretty good. Like I said, as we go through song by song, you'll kind of pin out which ones are preferred over which ones I didn't.
Yeah, so I think that's a fair way of breaking it down. I think when I suggested it, is I knew it'd be a bit of a challenging album, I suppose. That this is definitely not to everyone's taste, and I mean it's quite quite a critically acclaimed album, but still all the songs on the album on Spotify have most of them have either a million plays, or the most they have is about 3 to 4 million. So which for Spotify that's pretty relatively low key, right? That's not the biggest of the bunch, but that's not also bad, right? But it's clear enough. Because I suppose as well, I should explain that for me, again, this is definitely an outlier in my music taste in terms of, that's again sort of one of the motivations I had of talking about it, is that I could pick a ton, I could pick a ton of sort of indie albums that I enjoy listening to and really, really love, like Fall Out Boy, Infinity on High and stuff like that, like really, really like albums that I love and listen to all the time. But I don't think, for me, have the same sort of impact, I guess, because there's music I enjoy and then there's music that impacts me, right? And I think this was an album where I was like, damn, this is, as you mentioned, like an experience listening to it. And I think it's relatively low-key, but people who do know about it do think, it's a really, really great work. And I think it'd just be fun to talk about it. And, as we go on, I'll get more into my exposure to it and what it sort of experience of it was for me, I guess. But
yeah, I like that, and I think that's a really good way of putting it. Some albums are mainstream or not, are culturally, universally, or sometimes independently loved. Clearly this album, like you said, I did a bit of research behind it, is universally acclaimed. It's a change in style for the band. And yeah, so it's clearly got a cult following, as you're clearly one of them, which is great. I think that's this is our second music-based episode, but there are plenty more in the schedule, and then they are very diverse. And I think it would be cool to see, give an insight to the audience and ourselves, really, what our music taste can look like. It's never a one trick pony. We did Linkin Park last time, and now we've moved into industrial music, which you could see connections, but for some people they're absolute chalk and cheese.
No, I think that's totally fair. That like I think as we go on, we'll start to cover more of sort of our, I guess, sort of core music listening. I suppose that.
Well, I mean, I'm wearing a band T-shirt of a band we will probably cover soon. So, like we said in the last Linkin Park one, pop punk rock music is kind of my cup of tea. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. But this was a very different experience. But I enjoy, for a lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people can't do albums in their entirety. Some people
yeah,
like select songs. Some people will listen to a bit of an album, like as we kind of discussed last time, really. But I enjoy listening to albums through from the beginning to the end. Some albums were designed for that. I feel like this album definitely was. It's
yeah.
almost a story to it potentially.
No. I think you're definitely right that there is a sort of, as we'll probably get into more details to just exactly how it sort of feels that way. But I've explained it to my friends to try and sell it to them, and I think Archie's sick to death of sort of hearing me talk about this album specifically. Is it feels like listening to a horror movie. It's the construction of the songs, the sounds, like the it just, the themes, it just feels like a horror movie. Like as I guess sort of I should explain that my exposure to this album sort of came from so it was November of 2018, I remember, and 2018 was a pretty rough year for me, and I was having a rough time at uni and that kind of thing. And so this sort of dropped in late November of 2018, I think, and at that point 2018 was a pretty significant year for me, I think, sort of in my music taste. Is that, after first year, we, like my flatmates, we had a Spotify album, like a collaborative one, which was called The Pentagon, because we were we were flat five, and there was five of us, and so we all sort of contributed songs to it. And so I started getting exposed to a lot more music, because at that point I dabbled in stuff that my friends had recommended, but I hadn't actually routinely sought out new music and new sounds. So I was pretty, like I said, sort of like Tame Impala. I'd listen to Fall Out Boy, all of it, that sort of thing. Like just kind of not. I don't want to say basic, because that's not fair on people who enjoy that music, and I enjoy it myself. It's not basic. It's just,
I think mainstream's the way
yeah,
to kind of safely put it, because it is, if it's listened to by the masses, it's in the mainstream, it's in the charts, it's popularly and culturally well known. So yeah, sorry,
yeah.
carry on.
No. That's totally fair. The mainstream's probably the best way of putting it. But I was pretty much sort of mainstream, and so being exposed to other people's music tastes, every night we had a drink or stuff like that, I was like, oh, there's so many cool sounds out there. I'd never listened to the Smiths before until my flatmates introduced me to a lot of reggae, some dub, a lot of dub music I still enjoy, but a lot of sort of classics. One of my flatmates was massively into Leonard Cohen and stuff, so it was interesting, the sort of spread that we got. And one of them was really into Gavin Dance, and then another one was into sort of trap music. So it was a pretty diverse selection. But essentially, in 2018, I started watching and listening to Anthony Fantano's reviews. So the Needle Drop, who I'm sure most people who are even remotely involved in the online music scene would be aware of, is he's very, very, very popular, very well known music reviewer. His reviews get listed on Wikipedia pages alongside sort of dedicated publications like Pitchfork and Metacritic. So he's pretty much a tastemaker for a lot of people. And I remember in November of 2018, I was having a pretty rough time, and then suddenly I saw this video in which he released a new review of this really mysterious looking album cover, and I was like, it's pretty scary looking, right? Like, we've got it in the top left corner there. It's a little bit pretty ominous. And so I watched the review, and I always have the habit of sort of opening the description box, because he always lists, if you scroll to the bottom, he always lists his score at the bottom. I just want to know what it is. And I scrolled down, and it was 10 out of 10. And he'd been reviewing albums. Well, he has been reviewing albums for like almost a decade now. I think he started like 2012 or 2015, so a long time. And he only has, as of currently, 7 albums that were 10 out of 10 in all that time. So I was like, holy shit, like, what is it about this album that makes it 10 out of 10? Because if he's giving it 10 out of 10, that's a pretty big deal, right? And so I I didn't listen to it immediately because I was like, his description of it was like, oh my god, this is like being hit by a wall of sound. It's like so. I was like, that perhaps sounds a little bit too much for me. Because
Yeah,
again, prior to this, I suppose it's worth explaining that I did listen to mostly sort of indie music and stuff like that, but I had dabbled in death grips. So anyone sort of remotely aware of music memes and stuff like that will probably come across death grips, and I think we're going to talk about them as well because Anthony Fantano helped expose me to them. As one of his other 10 out of 10s in that 7 that he has is The Money Store by Death Grips from 2012, which is not my favorite album of theirs, but it was sort of a gateway. But they are
yeah,
an incredible band and very, very sort of, as you mentioned, about an industrial sort of sound. They're like an industrial hip hop, sort of experimental hip hop band. So they're one of my all-time favorites and one of my most listened to on Spotify. But yeah, I basically sort of at one point I was walking home after going food shopping on a pretty bleary and very, very blustery and very cold and wet winter day in Edinburgh, and I just decided to put this on while I was walking home, and it absolutely scared me shitless. Is it when I'd never heard
especially I think the scenery you've just described probably adds to the ambience. Probably.
It absolutely did. It absolutely did. As we'll get onto it, to one of the songs, Ocean Song. I was listening to that. I was just walking home in the pitch black and just walking through the meadows in Edinburgh, this big park. And I was like, holy shit. Like, it really set the scene. But I literally had to take my earbuds out when I got back to my room and just put it down because I was actually scared because of the sounds. So I think that's where my appeal of wanting to talk about it and the impact that it has, I think, came from it. And so I know I've been talking a lot, but I don't know if you sort of felt that at all, Aidan. I don't know if you did, but
I definitely did, and like I said, I made a few notes on each of the songs and so forth. I get the horror stuff, and I get the if you were in a particular place, situation, mood, it probably would freak you out. Unfortunately, I was just listening. The first time I listened to it, I was just kind of sat there. I'd just gotten back from I think the gym, so I wasn't like in a dreary place. I wasn't walking anywhere. It was still light outside.
yeah.
And so I kind of sat there and felt it, and then I literally listened to it today. At work, I had it on whilst just doing some emails and stuff. So again, there was maybe I didn't sit and listen to it in the right frame of mind, but equally, I still got some of those elements you're on about, and like some of the ones I'm looking at now, like there's a lot of times I put like horror themes or horror vibes to it. So yeah, I definitely do get it, and I think that's kind of cool that you had that kind of experience. There's a lot of albums that people have similar to experiences, some have different. So yeah, I mean, let's just dive into it. Let's go song by song if you want to start.
Yeah, so the opening song is City Song. So this is, of course, a very interesting opening to an album, as opens quite sparsely, I think, in terms of the sort of production. Like, it's not very loud, it's not very intense at first. It's just, Alexis Marshall, the lead singer, just making sort of spoken word passages about this city is an empty glass, words do nothing, no one sleeps, this city is an empty glass, graciousness is lost, the betrayed yearn. I know you mentioned to me earlier that you had a bit of a problem with some of the some of the vocals, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean that is again on my notes here. I loved the music behind it. I loved everything about that. It definitely felt like it was setting up the album. It was starting to tell a story. It gripped me. But unfortunately, when the vocals started to come in, I sort of fell out of it, and I was a bit like, okay, it doesn't. For me, it didn't hit as well. It took me away from the music. I felt personally, and as I said, I don't have problems fully with the vocals because some of it goes perfectly with it. But for this one, I just felt like as an intro to the album, they could have just kept the music as itself, just kept it instrumental. And I think you'd really set yourself up for something, and then going into the next song would have really opened you out to engaging with it.
I mean, this is not one of my favorite songs in the album because it's quite slow for the rest of it. Like, it does build to a really, really great crescendo. There's this sort of yeah shrieks and this. It's really, really fantastic. And it does close out as you sort of talk about the transition. Is that my favorite song on the album? Well, one of my favorite songs on the album is "Long Road No Turns," which is the second song, as we'll get into. But for me, I can't really enjoy it the same way without the transition from the first song. So
I love albums that do that.
so like it's like the ending part sort of like builds up to the next bit. Like, I don't know if it's the sudden shift in sort of instrumentality or what, that like the sort of the shift makes it more impactful, I guess. Like, it hits me more. Like, I'm like, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I also have the fade setting on my Spotify that fades about 3 seconds in. So as one song's
Right.
ending, the next one starts to begin, and again, even though I wasn't completely into it, that transition because of the fade worked very well in the album's favor, and I was like, okay, this rolls into the next song very well. Now, I'm a huge fan of albums that do that. It shows us, it wasn't just a disjointed bunch of songs put together. They had a idea in mind. They had a path of how they wanted to put it. They've ordered this album a particular way, and I appreciate things like that. So that the transition with the fade on, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think that does make a lot of sense. I think for myself, I don't think I have the fade setting on Spotify. So
I'd suggest it. A few people I've said try it have enjoyed it. And even when you've got like mixes on, like if you've just got a daily playlist on, sometimes you just get some songs that you wouldn't put together. But the fade in and out to the next one actually kind of keeps the vibe going, or even if it's a change in vibe, it kind of works really well for it. Yeah, give it a go. I suggest it to anyone, even if you just try it for a playlist. Just
yeah,
put the fade on. I do about 3 to 5 seconds, and it works really well actually. And you do find actually you're getting some kind of decent flows starting to push through as your playlist kind of shuffles. I mean, I think playlists where the music is more similar, it works better. But I've had some
yeah.
random ones where I think we had on a few days ago. I think we were listening to like an 80s song, and then it just went into Kings of Leon, but somehow the fade just I just kept kind of accepting what was happening right now, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that works. So yeah, give it a go,
All right,
people.
okay. Yeah, no, I think
The transition from City Song into Long Road worked very well. That was one of the things I picked out straight away. Was subtle transition to the next song is a win for me.
no, I think if you explain the transition, is that you have that the whole song is do 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 sort of like it's effectively it sort of feels like he's setting the scene of this sort of bleak landscape. There's this broken city. Just the city is an empty glass, and there's just nothing there. No one weeps and all that sort of thing. So it's all very bleak, sort of narrative wise, and then it sort of builds this crescendo with this like the massive feedback, and it's like this squealing sort of reverb. It reaches this peak, and then you just hear this and it's this great sort of like, I feel like this almost a crowd just making this almost like primal scream, and it just goes into this intense wall of sound. Is the only way to describe it really, as I think Fantana did. But as this sort of song reaches its climax, all the music sort of all the instruments drop out, and it's just Alexis Marshall sort of slowly going through the lines like, the breath is long, and the fires are out, and the water sits still. And then there's a brief sort of pause, and it goes straight into one of my favourite songs, one of the ones I listen to the most from this album, and what is one of the highlights of the album is this dun 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 of Long Road No Turns, which is also, as a sort of the theme of this album, a very, very bleak album lyrically. Very bleak, but it's also, which contrasts very heavily to the intensity of the instruments and the sounds and the guitars at work. The guitar work in this album, like, it doesn't even sound like guitar. Like, they use such heavy feedback on so many different things, and there's brilliant use of organs in a lot of the songs and stuff, and they use so many different sounds to, a lot of horns and stuff like that to really flesh out this ominous sound. But yeah, I don't know how you felt about Long Road No Turns. Was this one of the songs you did actually like?
Unfortunately, it wasn't. Again, I find the Nine Inch Nails inspire that was one of the first things I picked up. I was like, this sounds like a very classic Nine Inch Nails song, very much around, like the Downward Spiral kind of days and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just my note is that unfortunately I didn't enjoy this one.
Hmm.
But don't worry, viewers, it's not crapping on this album because unless you've got anything left to say on this song, uh, Satan in the Way changed my mind, and that's when I decided, okay, there is still time for me to pick some like songs for this. Really,
Yeah, I was saying in the way it's fantastic. It was it was the sort of like lead single for this album.
okay, that makes sense.
And so I think that's the third song, so we'll get into it. But for me, Long Road No Turns is definitely one of the highlights. I remember listening to this almost every day on the way to uni on the walk over. But
Okay.
it's a very quite a challenging song in terms of its content and yeah, I mean from the lyrics, like it just instantly sort of opens with this we talked about that transition going from the sort of quiet ending, very very silent ending of City Song into this just massive wave of sound, and the lyrics sort of kick almost straight in. It's like everybody climbs up high, then falls real far. A little is all it takes. A little is all it takes, and that's one of the most recurring things. And I think it was based upon like the mindset I was in at the time listening to this. That's how I felt. Is that I got so high just to sort of for everything to sort of fall apart, and it's crazy how like a small thing can sort of
Absolutely. I
completely
mean,
unravel
I
us,
will
I
say,
guess.
lyrically, I can't bash this album. There's the themes and the content are very prevalent and
Hmm.
um, very direct and powerful. Like I said, as a lot, music is very subjective. The lead singer's vocals were just a swing and a miss for me, but lyrically, I can't fault it. It's what it is on the tin. It's very much a dark, broody, kind of satanic album, I'd say. But I'm into stuff like that, and like I said, Satan in the Way was very good. I very much enjoyed that one. And I know Satan's in the title of this song, but
Hmm.
it did feel very satanic. It felt like there was almost a devil, a devil in the lead singer in this. It felt very dark and very angry, and you know, I felt it. I was definitely in for it. And something else I picked out was the bass line on this song was beautiful. It was so good. One of the first things I picked out was how good the bass line was to this song.
Yeah, so for Satan in the Way, I think as we'll move on from Long Road No Turns, but I think for Satan in the Way, it sort of just instantly opens that sort of opening, boom, just the first percussion work in the song. It just hits and
Yeah.
it's instantly. One of the highlights of this album is definitely the percussion. Is
Mm.
that there's and a lot of these you mentioned about the bass line as well. That there's a lot of the music's very repetitive, very droning, right? So like there's for a lot of the scarier songs, if you think about sort of like a high, sort of almost drone in terms of the percussion, and it creates this sense of sort of I guess urgency, this unsettling sort of. Is it the drums sound ominous, sort of like
Yeah.
a drum beat of war almost, and it's something about the combination of that with the bass line just makes it, as you're right, that it feels like it's almost like you're listening to a ritual going on. And I mean, the lyrics sort of back that up, their bodies are opening up and stuff like that. But, it was even like from the first lines, that bastard had a head like a matchstick, face like he was sucking concrete through a straw. It just, I think that's brilliant, right? Like in terms of just, it's such a weird sort of opening for the song. But yeah, Satan in the Way is about a 7 minute long song, and I
Yeah.
mean all the songs we've listed so far have all been above 5 minutes or above. So their opening song, City Song, and Long Road No Turns, they're both about 5-6 minutes each, and then 7 minutes with Satan in the Way. So it's a pretty meaty opening to the album.
Yeah, definitely. And I must say, and it continues throughout, but the production of this album is very well done. Like I said, even though it's not completely my cup of tea, I can't crap on the production value. I can't crap on the content to it. And again, the instrumentals of this album are really good.
Hmm.
And I think that's when you've you've got to appreciate when an album, regardless of your taste or not, is still good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if it was just someone, screeching, doing pig squeals for some people, that's fine. But I'm not going to be able to. I'm not
Have you
going to
been
be able to
listening to
defend
some
that.
Cannibal Corpse then?
Yeah. But whereas this, it is dark, it is broody, and okay, the vocals aren't always my cup of tea. But again, it's a strong album regardless, and I won't be able to crap on it. And some albums, we may completely disagree on, and we could have a proper debate on what's good or what's bad in our perspectives. But
Yeah, yeah.
credit where credit's due. Like I said, some of these songs I will not, I wouldn't listen to again. But some of them are on my liked now. They are liked on my Spotify. I will probably give them another go if I'm feeling a particular way. I will go to these songs. So, yeah.
I think that's definitely a good point. Actually, is that I don't, prior to this podcast, I hadn't listened to this album for quite a few months. Is that this is not something I regularly listen to, which is why again I think I chose it more for the podcast to sort of talk about. Is that I don't regularly listen to this album. I don't sit down and be like oh, it's on my on repeat on Spotify all the time. It's not something I routinely consume, and as I said, it's very much an outlier in terms of the music I enjoy. I tend to do not prefer things this dark or intense, but I think that's why it stood out for me and it was something worth discussing. Is because
Absolutely.
because it isn't something I listen to regularly, but it's something I feel very, very strongly about, and something that I really, think other people could maybe, connect with in some way. I guess that I'd hope that someone out there would listen to this and be like, wow, these are very dark messages, but something about that sort of connects with me in some way. I guess, and I think that's maybe the overall aim of most art, right? That like you want people to connect with it in some way and to have that feeling of connection with it and to find some resonance, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And like it's like as the listen numbers kind of show, it's got a following. It's it was acclaimed by critics, but it's clearly acclaimed by fans as well. And you know, just because you've got one person here who is on the fence with it, doesn't stop it from being an extremely popular album for other people and meaning a lot to other people. I think that's the thing I love about music. I don't like people who will shit on music just because it's popular or just because it's indie. You've got these people who will go out their way because, you know, Taylor Swift, for example, just because I know she's re-released Red and that's all in the news. I
Yep.
like her, and I do not mind her at all. But people who go out their way and say she's shit just because she's popular or her music's a bit samey, then just don't listen to it. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's shit in general,
No.
because the fact that she's re-released Red, obviously, because of legal reasons, but people are still going back and accessing that. And this album is accessible even if it is just to a smaller crowd. That's their music, and I don't think people should ever feel bad for liking a certain band or artist. This listening to this doesn't make me think of you any other way. And that's the other thing. Just because you listen to metal or you listen to pop or you listen to classical doesn't make you a certain way or a certain person. Just because I like my heavy metal and my pop punk doesn't mean I'm anti-establishment. It doesn't mean I go around vandalizing and trashing shit and starting fights. Again, I think that's the beauty of music, is when people see the subjectivity to it and see that there's a community behind it. It opens up a door, and you never know. You might find someone who listens to this album because of this podcast. And please reach out if you do listen to this because of this.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I'd love
And
to know.
talk to us about it. And for Nathaniel, you might meet someone who you would have never met before because of an album. I know I have. There's a whole thing at the moment with obviously with the Travis Scott travesty.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, a lot of metal fans kind of coming together, been like 90% of the time, because there are still dickheads
Of
around, but
course, in any
the
community,
metal
right?
community, obviously where mosh pits and stuff are quite synonymous with. They're a community though. Like if someone falls down, like I said, 90% of the time, you're damn right someone will stop the crowd, or you will have people move around that person so they have time to get up. There was a story I saw regarding the Travis Scott thing at the Slipknot festival. They had a guy in a wheelchair, and they were helping him mosh in the pit and stuff. And that's what music should be about. It should be about community and spirit. And if you don't appreciate an album, as I don't appreciate this album as much as you do, I still want to hear your opinions. I still want to know why it resonates with you, and then I can share albums that resonate with me. And that's the beauty of this. And I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent a bit,
No,
but
absolutely not.
music is really important to a lot of people, and I really disagree with people who shit on other people's music for no other reason. We all do it as kids. Again, I'll put my hand up here, some confessions coming out here. Justin Bieber, when he first came out, and every girl was fangirl over him, and I was like, "Oh, he's a dickhead. He's shit. I will take my words back. I like Justin Bieber now as well. You open up to either liking them or you just accept them for their art. His earlier stuff, I just accept that was a time period. It was a young lad who found by Usher is huge. Respect. I can't shit on that.
Yeah.
The only time I would not even shit on people's taste in music is when, musicians are doing things that are wrong, or have broken the law, or have done heinous things. That doesn't mean I'm going to judge the person for liking the music, but I'm going to probably step away from the music, or perfect example, and we'll get back to Daughters in a minute, is Lost Prophets. I know for a lot of people, they can't listen to that band anymore because of how fucked up those things that he did are. I struggle with it, and it's weird actually. I had a conversation with one of my friends about it, and I was like, "Is it actually okay to listen to Lost Prophets because of what happened?"
Yeah.
But then on the other side is that was a band, and how dare that one lead singer's actions cause you to completely cut off a band where they had nothing to do with that?
Yeah.
So I actually went back and listened to a bit of Lost Prophets, and I did it more for the band. And again, sorry, just. Music is a very passionate thing for me.
Why are you apologizing?
No, I'm just rambling. But
but this is what we want.
This is kind of going back to Daughters. I can see why so many people would resonate with this because of the content, because of the music, and for people who like industrial music, this is right up their alley. I don't know much industrial-based bands, but I'd say this is probably straight up their alley. And what I'm saying is, whilst I don't see the universal acclaim from my own stance, I get why people do, and I appreciate that. So anyway, back into track 5.
I think we're on track 4 actually with the Flammable Man.
Is it 4? Yeah, you're right. Track 4, Flammable Man.
Because again, as we sort of move towards the midpoint of this album, we had the first 3 sort of monolithic opening tracks with City Song, Long Road No Turns, and then Satan in the Way. We sort of transitioned into a couple sort of shorter songs. So we have the Flammable Man, which I actually think is a bit of an underrated part of this album. It's like it's a little bit straightforward. Like it's only under 3-minute song. It's just I don't lie, work at night, and it's pretty simple, sort of lyrically and musically, and as the next song sort of is as well. But when we have this sort of transition into the outro, like the instrumental goes insane. I don't understand what they did to their guitars to make these sort of sounds come out, but it sounds just like I suppose
Chaos.
Yeah, like what the inside of the realm of chaos would sound like. It's just like I can't do it justice at all. It's one of the ones worth listening to, even if you don't like the rest of the song. Just that last bit as it moves towards the outro, it's just goes wild. And it's just with this repeating line of, is something burning in here, or is it me? Just that, I don't know. It's just, I guess that it's that feeling of just being sort of, not even knowing that you're sort of burning, your life down around you. That sort of lack of self-awareness that some people can have, and they're just sort of consumed by things, I guess, is the way I interpret it, at least. But I don't know.
I really enjoyed this one. This was one that I enjoyed. I'm actually a fan of kind of short songs sometimes, as long as they point, and this song very much does. I mean, in my notes, like I said, it was chaotic, but purposefully. And it was short and sweet, but I absolutely adored it. It was again, after Satan in the Way, I kind of was like, okay, I'm interested, and then this carried on. I went, okay, yeah, cool. I'm
Hmm.
starting to pick up now. Great song, short and sweet, but like you said, lyrically, I was like, I kind of resonated with it. I was just like, yeah, I get it. Almost that chaos, that confusion, the almost the unknown as well. I suppose what I got from it, like that
Hmm.
fear of unknown, and then obviously the instrumental just goes absolutely wild at the end. That is what I feel like it would be, you know, kind of been in an unknown situation, or been in a bit of a rut, and then just something just kind of smashing through the wall, and or like a realization, almost like an epiphany.
Hmm.
That's what that song kind of gave for me. Yeah, that was probably again one of the highlights of the album for me.
Yeah, no, I think the album does this brilliant thing of sort of having, as we said with the City song and with this song as well, is having a sort of a repetitive sort of, I guess, instrumental setup, which they then just kind of like smash apart in this
Mm.
sort of like, I don't want to sort of compare it, but it's almost sort of like a classic sort of dubstep drop almost, but with so
Yeah.
much more kind of, just intensity behind it, is it dubstep songs sort of Skrillex style would sort of build up and then and then they have the big drop
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. But for this, it's like they have a very intense sound that's just really heavily repetitive with these quite repetitive lyrics as well, which then sort of collapses in on itself into this sort of, I guess, black hole of just intensity, and I love it. Like it just gives you, even if you do kind of slip into a bit of I'm not saying that these sort of repetitive instances aren't more intense. They are very intense sort of instrumentally and vocally, but it's just, if you listen to it long enough, you do kind of sort of slip into a lull, and it suddenly just hits you with this wave
Mm.
again, and really brings you, each song sort of brings you back up to speed with it. But yeah, another great song, I think, sort of underrated in this track list. I think it's one of the least listened to, I think, actually. Yeah, it's
Oh,
just
okay.
1.5 million listens to on Spotify. So that's, I mean,
You
the whole
get
album's
that a
pretty.
lot though with kind of interlude tracks, as
Hmm.
some albums do. But actually, I some of my favorite songs actually come from interludes or outros or so forth.
Mm.
So yeah, to be fair, it was probably one of the favorites on the album.
Yeah, and I mean, from there we move into the fifth song, which is pretty similar in terms of, like, they do, for me at least when I listen to it, like, I'm not checking my phone. Like, I'm walking. Most of the time, be walking to uni, and so for me, the sort of transition wouldn't be that obvious, right? They both sound pretty similar. They're both sort of the same sort of tempo, but the Lord's song is basically sort of sarcastically, I guess, about the sort of absence of God sort of thing. It's the same sort of like style of delivery in terms of the vocals, that he's like. Something way to bring it, a heavy heart, a heavy heart, a heavy heart wanting, for the chorus to sing itself in rounding years to fade. It's the way he delivers it is very similar to the Flammable Man, I think. So, but yeah, I again enjoy it towards the end of the track a lot more than I do towards the beginning.
Yeah. Again, the notes on this one. This one felt very much like it would be in a horror movie. Like if you
Hmm.
again, I mean, even with the lyrics actually, but I felt like it was very much you could pop this in a horror film and it would set the scene quite well. Um, the organs felt very like religious,
Hmm.
um, but quite satanic. Obviously, I think the irony is probably purpose, but it feels like a very satanic song, but it's called the Lord's song. I think it is a bit of a shot at God,
A
maybe.
bit of a perversion of God's sort
Yeah,
of purity, right?
definitely. Yeah, again, it was a decent one. I liked it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Like, it again, it's very repetitive. Just cry on. But again, I feel like we get a little bit more of an electronic sound almost. I know it was probably, I'm not a musical expert, but I'm pretty sure it's just a guitar sort of filtered through a bunch of modular. What is it? What if I?
It might be distortion, or
Yeah, it's some sort of some distortion which made it sound like they sort of overlay over the organs, and it's just this. I can't even. I'm not even
might
begin
have
to
been a
try.
whammy pedal. I haven't listened to it.
It's
I can't remember that bit, but I'm no musical expert either. It's a
Yeah,
shame Ben from last week's not here. He's more musical savvy
he's
than
probably the
I am.
most out of all of us. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think in terms of the songs of this album, it's definitely a good one. But then we move into actually one of my favourite songs from this album, and
yeah, I can
quite
see it.
quite a big departure from the
Mm.
rest of the albums. I think it's a suitable sort of bus stop almost. Is that this song "Less Sex" is completely different from the other songs in the album, at least initially. Is that this is a very, very slow song, very low tempo, not the same sort of wall of sound that we've had. It doesn't have the speed of the Fallible Man or the Lord song, and it's much more along the lines of sort of Satan in the Way, the sort of like slower sense of foreboding rather than a sense of just panic, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah, you said that did you like this one
I
or?
liked this one a lot. The lyrics again. This was one of the times the vocals and the lyrics worked hand in hand very well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, it's called Less Sex, but it was a very sexy vibe. I've got quite a lot of
Mm.
80s vibe from it, that kind of 80s era. Um, yeah, I enjoyed this one. Again, I'm at heart a sucker for 80s kind of music. And then this kind of worked. Would you have in maybe a sex playlist? Who knows? But I could see it being popped in there for some people, and I wouldn't blame them.
I mean, if you can have "Closer" by Nine Inch Nails in this Express,
Yeah, yeah. If
I
you've got
think
clothes,
you could have
fit
you could have
hand in
this.
hand. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
if you're looking for a sort of follow up, I think this would do pretty well. The same sort of like tone and that, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, again, as is the sort of framework of this album, it's very sort of sparse lyrically, but you know, uh, it's been stuck in my head for years. I let it into my head. Because the whole sort of album, song, sort of follows this, like Smosh would say a line, and then this sort of guitar going, so sort of like highlight that line, and carries on throughout the song. But it also has points in these sort of between the verses, had this heavy distortion, almost like shoegaze like guitar, where it's just this. I think you'll understand if you listen to the album what I mean, but it's just like, and it slips back in, but after the verses, like that dies down again, and it's like
Yeah.
you have that sort of, I guess I don't know how you describe it, but that sort of rhythm or flow to it that works fantastically, and it works as a brilliant sort of breathing room. Is the way I see it for this album is that you have a very intense opening, and this sort of lets you let your ears rest a bit and regain, while also still carrying on that sense of subtle foreboding, I guess. So it's still on theme. It's not like they're suddenly dropping out of the overall.
It's very much like a horror story. This is like the part where the final girl or final character is very much thinks that they're safe, and things are kind of, they're still in a state of panic, but they've gotten away. That they've got that sense of escape, freedom, and obviously, but as the audience know, and as this album is kind of leaning to, is you still got you've got the final girl circuit, as horror fans call it, but you've still got that third act to go through.
Yeah, like the danger's still hovering above you. It's just waiting for its turn, sort of thing. So no, I think that's a great way of putting it. That it is sort of hovering bodingly of it. But then we move into track 7 with Daughter, which is an interesting song on this album that I think is again sort of forgotten about in the track list, and I tend to forget about this song because, as I say, whenever I listen to this album, I listen to it all the way through. I don't tend to just listen to the one song because it is, as you said, that you like albums that sort of are a complete package, right? And I think that's definitely what this is that it's almost it's almost a concept album that it is trying to carry on this theme, this narrative of just danger and sort of mental imprisonment and collapse, and I think you don't get that full experience of that listening to it all the way through. But Daughter is definitely one of the highlights for me, I think. And I mean, as I said, I love the whole thing. It's all 10 out of 10 for me, but still, in terms of what I think about the album, I think this song is one of the ones I'm like, oh, I kind of forgot about that, like, because the song we'll talk about afterwards is literally one of my favorites from the album. and probably the most consumable. But this one kind of gets, I think, sort of lost in amongst the greatness of the other ones. So I don't know about
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I mean, from the notes in this one, it felt like another kind of 80s horror movie because it was kind of keeping the 80s theme but moving into the more horror sort of theme again. It felt like I was kind of going on an adventure this one. I did feel like it was kind of almost had acts to it. And then when it had finished and moved on to the next song, I kind of was like, oh, okay, the story's over. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, again, production wise and, instrumentally and so forth, it was very well put together. And like I said, I kind of like that it took me on an adventure. I like songs that kind of make you. This one kind of made me daydream into my own kind of thoughts of a horror film and what would be going on in this moment. So, yeah, one quite a powerful one actually.
Yeah, I think sort of lyrically it creates this sort of image of this sort of like unholy war almost. As like throughout it, he's there's a war going on, and as I mentioned, it's like lost love in a gaping maw, the same dead hand knocking at the door, the same dead hand knocking at the door. There's a war, and it's just. So you get some of the best lyrics in this this song actually on the album, like "Oh, love is a tired whore," and it's just that's brutally dark.
A lot of well, speaking of anger, but there's a lot of almost anger and hate and dark thoughts in this album. But yeah, like you said, the latter few songs definitely kind of show that more.
Yeah, I think the way I see it is I think the way I feel the best way to describe it is it's just malice, if you know what I mean. I think
Yeah,
it's not so much anger, but it's more sort of subtle in that regard. It's like I think it's so like if you listen to say Disturbed or something like that, it feels more like straight up anger, or like in Slipknot, right? Like Psychosocial is my best sort of referral to what I think of like a just dead straight angry song. But
yeah,
this feels more sort of like not pure hatred, but more sort of just active horror and disdain at the world around you. I guess is
I
what
think
I
that
feel
moves
like it.
quite well into what I thought of the next track, "The Reason They Hate Me."
Yes.
I literally put it feels like they're bubbling towards an explosive rage, but they never actually go there. Like you just
Yeah.
constantly like it's almost again a quite good reflection of life. It's you've constantly been beaten down, having crap happen to you, you're feeling shit, and you're always teetering on the edge of wanting to just absolutely lose your mind and just explode at someone, be it physically or just verbally. That's what this song definitely felt like. It just felt like I was constantly on edge and bubbling, waiting for that final explosion to happen. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, again, another interesting song.
Yeah, no, I think this is probably, if you're going to listen to any of the songs of this album without sort of if you don't want a challenging listen, if you just want like a really interesting rock song with the guitar, this is just
Yeah,
probably the most straightforward, I guess, straight up rock song that I could think of in the album. Like the guitar goes nuts on this, but it's not nuts in the sort of wall of sound way, more sort of just really interesting guitar work that sort of makes it a really compelling listen. And yeah, you're right, it does feel like that. This I've always what is it? I've always sort of felt it like. Do you know the bit in Wanted, right, where he snaps and he hits
yeah,
his manager
yeah.
in the face of the keyboard? I know they played the Nine Inch Nails as he did the whole soundtrack for that film, but I think that's what I would listen to. Like the "Don't tell me how to do my job, you gimme son of a
Yeah.
bitch." And like it feels like someone the
It fit nicely with that scene in Wanted for sure.
yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about Wanted because that's a great film and
Yeah,
definitely a highlight.
it's on the idea list.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about that because I think James McAvoy did such a good job on that. But anyway,
He's a very underrated actor, just off tangent.
definitely. But yeah, I think this is probably if you're wanting to dip your toes in this album and get a feel for it from a bit more straightforward, I guess, then this is a great track to sort of have. And this is definitely one more like one of the only songs from the album that I have in terms of like a gym playlist. So this is like a song I'd
Yeah,
listen to sort of separate from the rest rather than needing to be
yeah.
in a sort of state of mind. But yeah, and so that's the eighth song on the album, and we move into sort of the sort of closing tracks with two of the most interesting, I think, in terms of really pushing that sort of horror film theme
100%.
to its limits. That I guess, especially with Ocean Song, we get sort of like a Lovecraftian vibe, but
It's just a story. It's a straight up story, and
yeah,
it's great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Again, like this time, you know, going back to kind of Daughter, where I was imagining a story of my own. This just kind of basically goes, right, I've got a picture of Paul in my head. Let's listen to his story whilst there's some music playing in the background. Yeah, they basically just went, let's do a short horror film in a song.
yeah. I think they do it brilliantly. They sort of just open with the instrumentals back it up fantastically, but it sort of follows this story of Paul, who he's into the drive-in, kills the engine, he sits for a spell staring out the windshield, and so it's all very sort of it's like almost like you said, like a short story that you're watching Paul basically, and you see as he sort of as of course as the case with this album, things start to go wrong. He opens the door, the world is suddenly different, and he senses something terrible awaiting, a loose thread, a worsening. And in that moment, he turns to the sky. He knows it's darker now than it used to be. It's darker now this hour than it was last week. And then, a voice more primal is urging him. And then it cuts to sort of this another wave of sound, and it's just to go, to run. And this is the song I sort of had to take the earphones out with when I was listening to it, because when I first listened to it, I would say at this point, I'm mostly desensitized to sort of impact of this album, and I think maybe that
chorus gets you, definitely gets you.
It definitely gets you sort of in that state of mind, that fear of something chasing you, something hunting you, and it does such a great job with just and then as soon as that sort of refrain ends, it's just this dun 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 dun, which sort of continues throughout the whole song. There's this, as we said before, they have this sort of these underlying foundational instrumentals with the percussion that just keeps this foreboding sense of fear, just maintaining it, even when you have the sort of low points in the builds and the climax of the song. It does a fantastic job of that, creating this sense of tension.
Definitely, yeah. It was a good, again, one of the. I was more leaning to this song. However, my favorite song of the album is the final song of the Guest House.
Guest House is incredible.
The bass again. I know I mentioned the bass, but the bass on this was just oof. Like, again, it was the first thing I picked out. I was just like, yes, this is a very good bass line. Like, I appreciate bass lines, and especially being in the kind of like metal rock scene, you get some extremely great bassists. But yeah, the bass on this was so good. Like, I'd listen to this song again just for the bass.
Have you ever listened to Feet Don't Fail Me by Queens of the Stone Age? Yes, that's one of my favorite bass lines. When I think about bass lines, just the funkiness of that is incredible. I know it's very different to this sort of theme.
But I think a bass appreciation thread is probably needed. As you know, the kind of running joke is bassists don't get enough love, but some songs, if you didn't have a bass.
Well, bassists got the whole movie of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, so
Yeah, true.
But yeah, Guest House is a phenomenal ending for this album. That it perfectly encapsulates the energy, the themes, the narrative of this album, all in one perfect song. And I think, like, it could have been the case that they sort of, I don't know how you'd really end this album as an experience, like, but they somehow managed to create, like, dilute everything they'd had before, all these other songs, all that feeling and energy, into one sort of perfect creation of a song. But I as you said, it's your favorite, but it's also one of my favorites in terms of the album, because mostly because of the ending. Is it sort of we have, I guess well, I don't know if you ever remembered the the Eric Andre meme of wanting to be let into the White House, and he's like shaking the gate.
Let me in.
This is what I think of every time. That, let me in. Who put the padlock on the cellar door? Let me in. And it's like I always.
I actually I think subconsciously my head went, "Let me in" when he was singing it. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's what I think of, and I don't know. It's not as popular as other sort of interpretations of the meme. But that's the way I've always seen that, at least. But yeah, this narrative sort of is like this monster sort of coming out of the basement, like who put the padlock on a cellar door, like who did this, and that sort of indignant anger that they can't like lash out against the world, and I've been knocking and knocking, let me in, and it has this, I don't know, it just feels like I don't know, just this intense monster trying to break in, but it continues on, and the ending of the song is great. It has this huge sort of almost operatic sort of horn section. Is just wah, wah, and then it sort of fades out in a way where like it's quite subtle almost, and it feels like the way I interpret this is that's like seeing the dawn after a long dark. That you've had this,
again, it lures you into a sense of security.
Yeah, like,
and I think again, sticking with the horror theme, again, which is why I went back and listened to it, is it did kind of leave me wanting more. Like I said, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the album, that almost sense of security as the album and the song closed out, I was like, oh, okay, like what's next? Is there any more? And I did actually go back and I opened my Spotify and was like, oh, it's finished. Like, okay, that works. But I was kind of like, ooh, am I done here? Am I safe? Like, what's next?
no, and that's definitely why I sort of, because in a lot of horror films and stuff, like it's once the sun rises, the danger's sort of gone, and that's the way I feel like it creates that sound that's sort of like almost hopefulness that someone has sort of. I guess if you're listening to it and didn't like it, then I guess you're hopeful that you've got through the horror of listening to it. But if sort of narratively within the album, I guess it's like, well, this is the conclusion of this night of terror and all that sort of thing. So I think it's great, and this we've covered all the songs now, but I guess in sort of conclusion that this album covers some great themes of sort of horror. Like we've got some Lovecraftian themes, some sort of satanic themes, cult-like. A lot of Lovecraftian sort of introspection in terms of this unknown evil pursuing you, and then of course sort of like the classic sort of horror movie tropes almost, that you got that sort of I guess almost like a psycho by what's this, how am I forgetting, Hitchcock sort of Psycho in the soundtrack of that, and sort of this is almost an extended version of that, so it does sound like.
Okay, I picked up more John Carpenter on, but I suppose that just favours my taste. But I got Halloween-y type of vibe, maybe The Thing. It was definitely an experience, and I'm glad I've listened to it. It's a talking point. If like we've said, if anyone messaged us or got in touch with us to talk about it, I'd happily talk about it as we have today, because it was definitely an experience, and I'm glad I've been part of that. I suppose I can see why it's universally acclaimed by people.
No, absolutely, and like I said, it's one of the most impactful albums I've listened to. Not a regular listen of mine at all. Like, I'm definitely not. It will never show up on my most played or my on repeat. But if it's stuck with me, and I know it's there, and I the experience of listening to it for the first time and getting to know the album and getting to experience it more, and sort of how it resonated with how I was feeling at the time when I was exposed to it. I think and as you say, that's a very personal thing, right? That music is subjective, and people are exposed to either songs or albums at a certain time in their life, and they build that connection to it. They feel some meaning in it that it's very, very hard to communicate, that you can't fully explain to a person what a song or an album means to you, because it requires so much context, right? Like, you need to be in their mind almost to sort of encapsulate what that song means to them, and I think that's brilliant. That's why I love, we've had these two episodes with the conclusion of this, 2 episodes of the music podcast, and they're one of my favorite ones to do. I know there have been recommendations.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've lost words just because you're right. Like, what you just said is so true, and that was right. People who have listened to this episode or have, had an experience with this album or Daughters the band, please drop us an email or contact us, and talk to us about it. We want to hear. I love hearing new people's experiences of bands that I like and enjoy. It's how you befriend people. I mean, I remember being in many, many, many house parties during my college years and a bit afterwards, where if I found someone who'd put on a song choice for the for the night, or had a band top on. Like I think I saw some random dude once who was wearing a While She Sleeps top, and I was like, yes. And then he just went and shoved this guy's hand, and again, it's that all it takes is that one song or band or something, and you may have more in common with them afterwards, but that's how it starts for some people. I think it's beautiful. Music's a great thing, and we will be covering probably music every month. So there'll be a music episode every month to 6 weeks. We've kind of got a rolling rota going on, but if something becomes more prevalent, we'll slot it in. And I know I think we've got another music one the end of November.
I think we do we?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Is it Young Guns?
I think it's Young Guns Bones, which was my choice. I'm just going to quickly check, just so I don't disappoint anyone. Yeah, the end of November we're due to do cover Bones by the extremely amazing British band Young Guns. So yeah, I'm excited to do that, to be honest. Can't come fast enough. I gave it a listen. That's an album I listen to a lot, but we'll get into that anyway down the line. But
again,
thank you for this one. It's been it was a very interesting experience. I very much enjoyed it. And I'm excited to hear more albums that neither of us have known personally. I've looked at your potential podcast episodes for music, and I don't know any of them, if I'm honest. So I'm excited to give them a listen.
Well, it's the exact same for me. Is that a lot of I've never listened to Young Guns. I've listened to some of your recommendations before, but I'm not familiar with a lot of the ones coming up in the podcast. And for me, that's what I want to see. Is I want to be exposed to more music. But yeah, if you guys listening are looking for some new music to try, hopefully as we go along, we'll have some recommendations for you. But personally, for me, this would be on the top of my list for a unique listening experience, and maybe it'll expose you to a whole another side of sort of sounds and themes that you maybe weren't aware of before. And I think that's definitely what this album does. And it's a 10 out of 10 in my book, and it's 10 out of 10 in Anthony Fantano's, and it's critically acclaimed for a reason. That it's a fantastic album, and however subjective that is, it's mostly sort of universally acclaimed. And if you're looking for a unique experience, give it a go. And we'll hopefully catch you next week, I think, with later in the week with I think we're discussing Astartes. Is that correct? Hopefully it'll be a bit of a discussion of sort of Warhammer 40k, and sort of it's a huge world, and it means a lot to myself and sort of my friends who we'll have on as guests. So hopefully we'll get a good discussion going on about that, because I know, Aidan, you're not necessarily familiar as much with it. So hopefully we'll have some cool discussion around that. But yeah, thank you for tuning in for this episode of Nerd Empire Podcast, where we're discussing Daughter's 2018 album, You Won't Get What You Want. But hope you have a great week. Everyone. Yeah, and we'll catch you later.